Unit 2. Differences between academic cultures by Alwyn Alexander.
Hello, my name is Alwyn Alexander. I teach at a university in the United Kingdom, and I help overseas students to improve their academic writing skills. I often ask the students to reflect on the differences in education culture between the system in their countries and the UK. I think this helps them to critically examine some of the assumptions they make about writing at university. Today, I'm going to share with you my own reflections about differences in education culture. And I'm going to tell you a story which I hope will show you what I mean by education culture and how important it is to be aware that differences exist when you move from one education culture to another. The two cultures I'm going to talk about will seem on the face of it to be very similar. They are New Zealand and the United Kingdom. New Zealand was a colony of the UK, so English is the main language in both countries, and the New Zealand education system is based on the British one. It has primary, secondary and tertiary level education, with the tertiary or university level organised around departments, grouped into schools or faculties. Actually, I've got experience of studying in several faculties, science and arts in my first degree, and social science much later on in my postgraduate study. My first degree was in chemistry and physics, but it was modular, and I was able to take up to 5 modules outside the School of Science. I chose to study English literature in the School of Arts and Humanities. I don't suppose you could imagine 2 more different subjects, but I'd always been unable to decide between science and arts, and this was an opportunity to keep going with both of them. As you can imagine, there are a lot of differences in the way that science and arts students write and what they have to write about. Sciences focus on activity-based skills such as describing procedures, defining and solving problems. The arts are more interested in seeing that students can analyse several sources from different authors and synthesise these into their writing. Science undergraduates write reports with well-defined sections and subsections with headings, and arts undergraduates write essays. My story concerns that little word essay and my understanding, or rather my misunderstanding of it, in the 2 education cultures I'm going to talk about. First, I just need to tell you a little bit about these 2 cultures. They were both called social science. Some years ago, I studied for a master's degree in applied linguistics here in the UK in order to understand more about English and learn how to teach it more effectively. Several years before, I'd begun to study a postgraduate diploma in teaching English as a foreign language in New Zealand, but as it happened, I wasn't able to complete that diploma. Now, the content of these courses was very similar. They had the same kinds of modules and the same or very similar reading lists. However, as I discovered, the writing tasks were quite a bit different, and the view of what constituted a successful outcome was also quite different. To get back to that little word essay, you might like to think for a moment what an essay is. How would you write if you were asked to write an essay? For me, an essay is a logically connected piece of prose which sets out to make a number of points in order to answer a question. This question is usually posed in the introduction and answered in the conclusion on the basis of evidence drawn from the points made in between. Or so I thought. I'd written a number of essays for my TEFL diploma course and got rather good marks, but pride comes before a fall. On the applied linguistics course, the first writing task was an essay, just to see if we knew how to write one. No problem, I thought. I know what one of those is. I struggled a little with the writing, as I do with all writing tasks, even though I think I am quite an experienced writer. But what I produced, I thought, was a reasonable attempt at an essay. However, I got quite a low mark for it, and I went to my tutor to find out why. Well, he said, what you wrote was quite different from all the other students. In what way? I asked. Well, it was like an undergraduate essay. An undergraduate essay? I was a bit cross. Undergraduate? Alexander Pope wrote essays. Charles Lamb wrote essays. Were theirs undergraduate too? You can see I had quite a good opinion of my ability to write at this time. What did the other students do? I asked. Well, theirs were postgraduate projects with sections and subsections with headings. Oh, says I, just a little ironically, you want me to make it look like a scientific report? Well, yes, the tutor said. I discovered later in my course that social science in the UK, and possibly also in New Zealand, I just hadn't been aware of that fact, was suffering from what was called physics envy, or the desire to look scientific. Researchers in the so-called soft sciences envy the hard sciences for their ability to run experiments, control variables and produce reliable data, and they attempt to introduce the scientific method into their research and report it in scientific ways. Hence the style of the essay I had to write, which should really have been called a project all along. Of course, the contrast is not nearly as simple as I'm making out, but I don't really have time to go into that today. But this was my first lesson that different education cultures had different ideas about ways to communicate within their cultures, even though on the face of it they seemed as if they should be very similar. I learned a number of things from this, I think. First of all, I learned that the dictionary definition of a word, or the assumptions you've built up about it, may not necessarily be very useful when you move to a new education culture. Then I learned the necessity of paying attention to your audience and finding out about their assumptions, particularly if they're going to grade your work. And I also learned that it's essential for me to teach my writing class students how to research the academic cultures they'll be studying in, and pay attention to the way that culture chooses to communicate its knowledge and its research results. There'll be differences related to the level of study, undergraduate or postgraduate, the particular discipline, sciences or social sciences, and even the particular subject and department that the course is taking place in. So we cannot generalise across the whole of academic education and find one essay or report that fits all.